Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sweetwater County Library, the White Mountain Library, I should say, here in Rock Springs. And we're ready for round two of our debates for this evening, and we'll turn our attention here momentarily to the sheriff candidate debates. Before we get to our contestants, let me call your attention once again to our panelists this evening. From the Rocket Miner, the lovely and gracious Miss Deb Sutton.
Hi, Joni.
And the charming and delightful Miss Beth Whitman.
Hello.
Nice to see you ladies once again. Your candidates for this evening, Republican Rich Haskell, he is your incumbent sheriff candidate, and also Independent David Johnson, and the Democrat, also the Rock Springs Chief of Police, Mike Lowell. Good evening to all of you gentlemen.
Good evening.
Let me go over everything very briefly, ladies and gentlemen. Each candidate will get a 3-minute opening statement. We'll have questions from our panelists, where each candidate will get a 90-second period to answer. Then each candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to the other candidate's answer. Audience questions, we will have time for that as well. Then each candidate will wrap up with a 3-minute closing statement. Do our candidates have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Nothing.
Let me remind our candidates, gentlemen, we didn't have time to visit beforehand, so I apologize. And ladies and gentlemen here, this is broadcast live on AM 1360 KRKK. I believe it will be replayed on the Rocket Miner website as well.
Yes.
So gentlemen, if you have the tendency to face the panelists, which is completely understandable, feel free to move that microphone as well so we can hear you clearly here and also hear you loud and clear at home. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get underway with our opening statements, and we'll begin with Sheriff Haskell.
Well, good evening. I'd like to thank the library system for organizing this forum, and thanking all of you for spending this time with us so you get to know us. In a uniquely American way, events like this provide voters with the direct access to candidates and allows them to ask questions they deserve answers. The challenges we faced at the Sheriff's Office since I was first elected in 2007 have been numerous, as law enforcement challenges always are. But thanks to all the people I'm lucky enough to serve with, we've met those challenges and continue to meet them every day. It would be a privilege and an honor to be allowed to continue serving the people of Sweetwater County as your sheriff, and for the Sheriff's Office to carry on its tradition of providing them the highest possible level of law enforcement they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. That is your Republican, Rich Haskell, and now your independent candidate for sheriff, David Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start out by letting you all know a little bit about myself. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank the Sweetwater County Library System for hosting this. My name's Dave Johnson. I'm your independent candidate for sheriff. I graduated from Rock Springs in 1982. I then joined the Navy. I spent from 1982 to 1986 with naval aviation. I then came back. I went to work in the oil and gas industry till 1999. Then I joined the Sheriff's Office. I've been there for 15 years now. I earned the rank of sergeant in about 2007. During my career, I've worked on patrol as a supervisor, been involved in both tactical operations and boat patrol. I currently serve as the Sweetwater County Emergency Management Coordinator. I've been directly responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of our continued development of our plans, our emergency plans for the county. And I maintain department budget and grants. I have been instrumental in planning and carrying out a series of simulated disasters and exercises involving the cooperative efforts of many of the county's emergency services agencies. My role also includes overseeing the search and rescue, county search and rescue, our county dive team, the CERT team, which is our community emergency response team, the Sweetwater County Animal Response Team, and the amateur radio emergency services, which is our ham radio folks. In addition to these duties, I'm also the local emergency management planning committee chairman. I'm also on the state emergency commission, serving as the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear explosive subcommittee member. My experience working for the Sheriff's Office in emergency management has provided me with the work and knowledge to be an efficient leader of the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office and serving the people, and as your independent candidate, I hope to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, and once again, your independent candidate for sheriff, Sergeant David Johnson. Finally, with an opening statement, your Chief of Police from the Rock Springs PD and your Democratic candidate for sheriff, Mike Lowell.
Hello, my name is Mike Lowell. I'm running for the office of sheriff, and I'm not running against anyone. I'm a 32-year veteran. I rose through the ranks, and I've been chief for 12 years. My agency is one of the 5 largest in the state, and certainly the busiest in southwest Wyoming. In addition to that, I also serve on the Wyoming School Facilities Commission, which is charged with the responsibility to build all schools and acquire all land for that purpose. I also serve on the Task Force on School Safety and Security appointed by Governor Meade. I'm also chairman of the board of a local financial institution. I'm past president of Wyoming Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. I'm also a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And I serve on various committees and boards across the state that I think serve an economic or a political purpose for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That once again, your Democratic candidate for sheriff, Chief Mike Lowell. Let's get to our panelists, and this actually, first set of questions will be directed first to Sergeant Johnson, and asking this first series of questions, Beth Whitman.
Hello. Can you please tell me what criteria would you use to determine the order of calls and cases to respond or pursue, and why?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What criteria would you use to determine the order of calls and cases to respond or pursue, and why?
Well, I would base it on the urgency of the call. You know, we want to serve everybody in a timely manner, but some calls, you know, dictate if we're busy, obviously. We have a criteria of urgency, and obviously anything involving human safety, the safety of people, and that obviously takes a priority over a property issue. So that would be my main concern, is make sure that our priority is public safety for people, and then step it down to crimes against property and then civil issues.
All right, thank you. Same question next. We'd like to have that answered by Chief Lowell.
I think if you have one of the largest agencies in the state, you have defined parameters. Of course, personal safety comes first, but we allocate our calls to the various sections of our city. So if it's an animal control call, non-emergency, it goes to animal control. If it's a weed and nuisance call, non-emergency, goes to weed and nuisance. And believe me, weed and nuisance calls can be emergencies depending on who you're talking to. If it's a 95-year-old lady, you got a real emergency on your hands. Street narcotics crimes, or those are allocated to the street narcotics units if it's not an emergency call. If it's a patrol call, then of course it's allocated by sector, by district, by particular experience of the officer on duty, so we have a varied response.
Thank you.
Very good, Chief. And finally, that question to Sheriff Haskell.
Of course, we have, it's a little different situation in the county because we're so spread out. And not a lot of people on duty at the same time, but of course number one would be personal injury or personal against persons. Then you have to break it down to accidents without injuries, non-priority calls, as an example, dog calls, barking dogs, and as the chief explained, depends on who the person is, how the emergency is. So it would have to be personnel or personal injury, something happened to you would be the highest priority, and then we could just work it on down from there.
Very good, Sheriff. And moving right along, we're going to have our first series of rebuttals, and that being the case, let's get back to Sergeant Johnson.
I agree both with the chief and the sheriff on our priorities. I really have nothing else to add to that. You take it by case, and based on, you know, if it involves human safety, and then break it down to property, nuisance calls, and that pretty much covers all of it.
Very good. And anything in rebuttal, Mike Lowell?
No rebuttal, but our Combined Communications Center has a strict set of priorities we follow, and all agencies approve of those policies, so we're in line.
Very good, Chief. And finally, any closing thoughts on that same series of questions, Sheriff Haskell?
I really don't have anything different other than what the chief just said. Our combined communication system is right in place, and it pretty well prioritizes how the calls are going to happen and in that order.
Very good, sir. All right, moving right along, the next series of questions will be posed by Deb Sutton here, and Chief Lowell, this question is going to you first, sir.
What percentage of time should a deputy spend inside the city limits?
Minimal. We have a county of 10,000 square miles, largest in the state, fifth largest in the country. Does that mean we're going to cover it all? No, but certainly we're going to look at the back country first. The number one complaint I'm sure the sheriff receives will be the number of time deputies spends inside the city limits. We appreciate the help because we work together. We also think that if a violation is seen, whether it's in the city limits or in the county, that the officer who sees the violation takes that corrective action immediately, and then the jurisdictional person will take over. But the roles are defined, but law enforcement takes care of each other. So if I'm in the county, I see a violation, not my jurisdiction, but I am a reserve, I'm pulling it over. If it's more than a simple warning of ticket, I'm calling the sheriff. So does that mean that that deputy should ignore that call in my city because of political pressure? Absolutely not.
All right, very good. And moving right along, we'll go to Sheriff Haskell. That same question, what percentage of time should a deputy spend in the city limits?
Commissioners ask me that all the time.
And your answer is?
And my answer is, if a deputy, unfortunately, the office is in the city limits, and they have to come into the office to do reports and get paperwork and everything else. If a violation has been committed in their presence, they better not turn their head. They better act and do something about it. A minimal amount is all it takes, and they are doing that right now. We have 2 resident deputies in Wamsutter. We have a resident deputy on Farson, and the officers that are assigned to the Rock Springs area, our deputies, support those 2 entities also. So it's a minimal amount of time that they spend in the town. However, we have over 10,000 warrants issued by the courts. And unfortunately, most of those people that have warrants live within the city of Rock Springs or Green River. And they are going to serve those warrants in those 2 jurisdictions.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. And finally, let's pose that question to Sergeant Johnson.
Well, going along with the chief and the sheriff, the time will vary. Obviously, we can't overlook any infractions or violations that our deputies see when they're in town. And they have other responsibilities, like the sheriff said. Some of those responsibilities are serving warrants. They're also doing follow-up that from things that happen in the county, but they may have to go into the city limits to find some of these subjects they need to finish up on their follow-up interviews with. They're also serving civil papers. So the percentage will vary. You can't set a set percentage, I don't believe. Minimal, yes, but depending on what the deputy is doing, he might spend a good portion of his day in the city limits. But I agree with the chief and the sheriff that it's minimal, but it's dictated by what they need to do.
All right, very good. Chief Lowell, anything to rebut on that?
No, thank you.
Back to Sheriff Haskell.
No, sir, thank you.
Sergeant Johnson.
No, sir.
Very good, gentlemen. Thank you. Let me move right along, and Sheriff Haskell, you'll answer this next series of questions first, and they'll be posed by Beth Whitman.
How does the sheriff's office work in conjunction with the county attorney's office, and is there need for improvement, and if so, in what way?
I think we work hand in hand. Not only does the sheriff's office work hand in hand with them, so does the police department. All law enforcement works hand in hand with the county attorney's office in preparing the correct information they have to have in order to prosecute a case. We're constantly talking with them, they're talking with us. Meetings. How can we improve it? More communication. I think we need to talk more, not only just before the trials, but a little bit ahead of trials so that our officers and then the county attorney's office can be prepared to the best of their ability in order to prosecute that case successfully.
All right, very good, sir. Let me pose that question next to Sergeant Johnson regarding the sheriff's office working in conjunction with the county attorney's office.
Well, I agree with the sheriff. We got to work hand in hand with the county attorney's office. Obviously, there is communication issues sometimes. That always is, you know, no matter where we work, we find out there's communication issues, but we work well together. We need to work with them on the cases. It doesn't always work that way. You know, sometimes the county attorneys want something, they feel we need to, you know, give them a little more, and it'll clash sometimes. But, you know, that's something you got to work through. Just like the sheriff and the county attorney, it changes every 4 years sometimes, and you just plug forward and you keep working on that communication.
All right, very good, sir. Finally, Chief Lowell.
I think from a law enforcement executive's perspective, you try to present a case to the county attorney that is ready to go to trial. During those conversations, oftentimes they will want something more from you. You, of course, go out and get that information because the goal for you is to have that case ready so they can proceed. Now, it's not about conviction or unhappiness because you didn't get the amount of prison time or what you wanted. All an executive is really concerned about is, does the system function? Does the victim get what he needs? Does the suspect get what he needs? Is it as that? If there's a deal being made, does that deal benefit both sides? Is it economically smart to make that move? And it's done. Our volume at the PD is so heavy that we don't take an interest in whether you like the outcome or not. I'm more concerned with the process and making sure everybody has their day.
Very good. And gentlemen, before we get to rebuttals, we've got our panelists with a little additional leeway this evening. So let me get back to Beth. Does that satisfactorily answer that question to you?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, very good. That being the case, any rebuttal, Sheriff Haskell?
No, just communication is key. We have to be able to communicate back and forth. It's one of those deals where we agree to disagree, and we just work through it.
Very good, sir. Sergeant Johnson, anything in closing?
No, nothing.
Very good. Chief Lowell?
No, thank you.
Very good then. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move right along. We'll pass the microphone back over to Deb Sutton, and this series of questions will be directed first at Sergeant Johnson. Deb?
What process will you use to determine advancements and promotions?
Well, what we need to do is establish a core of eligible candidates within the department. Right now, we do testing and interviews. It's based on a wide variety of different things, report writing skills. You know, obviously, are they a natural leader or capable of leadership? And when we need to advance somebody or promote them, we take that core of folks and we do the process of testing and interviewing. And then we go from there. Sorry.
All right, very good, sir. Let me move right along to Chief Lowell once again. What process would you use to determine advancements and promotions?
I prefer a number of things. I prefer assessment centers, which is a way of establishing your ability to communicate both orally and in writing and your decision-making process. We do a written test. I like an oral interview. I prefer a board of people from outside the law enforcement community. We're represented, but you may have a minister, you may have a member of the Civil Service Commission. I like to see your latest evaluations, and I like your last body of work, and I like formal recommendations from their division commanders. And then we have a sit-down, we have a consensus after the testing is done.
All right, very good. Finally, Sheriff Haskell, that same question to you.
As the chief mentioned, we have an assessment center that's done by the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy, and they come down and administer a written test to the candidates. Years of service are a big factor, experience. We also have oral boards, and we go outside for the oral awards. We've chosen people from the Rock Springs Police Department, Green River Police Department, people within the same industry and the same makeup that we have at the Sheriff's Office. Also, their evaluations are a key factor. As Sergeant Johnson said, report writing, that's pretty important. And to be able to understand and read a report that has been written so that you can okay it or you can send it back to be updated.
All right, very good, sir. Moving right along, Sergeant Johnson, anything in rebuttal?
No, sir.
Chief Lowell?
No.
Anything in closing, Sheriff Haskell?
No.
Very good, gentlemen. Let's move right along, and we'll turn this question back over to Beth Whitman and Chief Lowell. This will be directed to you first, sir.
What, if any, educational and treatment programs do you support for jail inmates?
I like diversion in any form. I like detoxification in any form. I prefer anything that limits my cost for taking you to jail. I like drug court. I've been in since the beginning. In the world of law enforcement, you have two choices. Under the current doctrine, if I arrest you and get you into, it's a way of getting you into the system and ensuring that in front of a judge, you will have the option for treatment if you're not a felon, if you're not a violent person, and if you don't have a long-term history. I certainly think that's a good idea because it's called the world of forced choices. You have a choice, go to jail, go to treatment. If the second way is, and the way that I think we should be working toward is let's have diversion prior to jail. Let's not go to jail, because if you go to jail, first thing we're going to see, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose part of your family. So if we can take you and step you aside from that with the court's permission, and the county permission. Oh, I see that thing out there. Anyway, I haven't got my glasses on, pal, so I can't really read that. So anyway, I like diversion in any form. I think it's economically the most viable way to go, and certainly is better for families.
All right, thank you, Chief. Moving right along, next we'll pose this to Sheriff Haskell. What, if any, educational and treatment programs do you support for jail inmates?
We have several programs right now at the jail. Inmates are able to get their GED. We have JBX, which is jail-based mental programs. We have drug rehabilitation programs. There are a number of classes and things that are going on. Southwest Counseling comes in and does classes in there. We're so busy with classes in there that we're moving people constantly to the different programs so that they can progress. And part of the court sentencing, a lot of times, is anger management and those types of classes, and they are provided for the inmates in order for them to even be considered for probation or whatever else. They have to meet these things before the court will release them, but there are a number of programs going on at the jail right now.
Very good. Finally, let me direct that same series of questions to Sergeant Johnson.
Well, in order to shorten time and eliminate some redundancy here, I agree with both the sheriff and the chief on these programs, and the sheriff's right, the programs we do have are good programs, and the chief's right that, working these programs and keeping people out of jail saves the county money in the long run. A lot of these programs are cheaper than housing the inmates. So I don't really have much to add to that because they both covered it pretty well, but I'm definitely in support of all those programs.
All right, thank you, Sergeant. Let me get back to Beth Whitman. Does that satisfactorily answer your question, ma'am?
Well, I have an additional question.
You might.
What about counseling? What do you look at for counseling? I'm sorry.
No, thank you very much, ma'am. And let's begin the rebuttals with that follow-on question, and we'll send that to Chief Lowell, sir.
I think, let's go to rebuttal for a minute, okay? One of the things that concerns me as an executive is the cost that I incur on incarceration of inmates. Since I am the largest supplier in the county, and my city is, any program that can divert from incarceration, I'm in total support of. All programs the PD currently sponsors outside incarceration include counseling. There's never anything that doesn't include counseling, not one program.
All right, thank you, Chief. Either of those two questions or anything in rebuttal, Sheriff Haskell.
We appreciate your money too, Chief. It helps a lot. But we have a lot of counseling go on at the jail at this time, through Southwest Counseling, through independent counseling in the county. We've got to have it. You have to have it.
All right, very good, sir. And closing thoughts, if any, Sergeant Johnson?
No, the chief and the sheriff both covered it pretty much. I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, very good. And gentlemen, if I could encourage all of you to try and speak as directly into the microphones as possible so our friends sitting in the back rows can hear you adequately and also our listeners at home. Thank you. And we'll move right along back to Deb Sutton, our next series of questions, and this will be directed first to Sheriff Haskell.
I have a two-part question. What measures can be taken to reduce juvenile crime? And along with that, what is the next step in combating underage drinking?
First part was what again?
What measures can be taken to reduce juvenile crime?
Education, I think, is a lot of it, and getting parents involved. We just had a thing out at the fairgrounds, and an open house for the parents to come in and see what was going on with their kids in school. I think we had a half a dozen parents show up, which is really not very well when it involves your children, what's going on and being taught in the schools. And the second part?
What is the next step in combating underage drinking?
We just have to get more education and more involved with the children at a younger age.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Let me direct that question next to Sergeant Johnson regarding reducing juvenile crime and also specifically underage drinking.
Well, like the sheriff said, a big part of it, and I agree wholeheartedly, is getting parents involved. We see it all the time. You know, we go out, we bust up these kegers, we call the parents to come get these kids. A lot of these parents are offended that we're wasting their time to come out and get their kids when they're just out having a good time. So a big part of it is getting the parents involved, public awareness, and like the sheriff said, we continue with this program, Life Are You Ready? We give these young folks, pre-high school, the opportunity to learn about the consequences of their decisions. That's what a big part of that program is. But he's right, we did have a horrible turnout of parents for that open house, and that's a big thing we got to work on, is getting more involvement from the parents with these kids. We are not there to be their babysitters and their caretakers. We got to get involvement from those parents. And that's a community thing. That's something we all got to work together with, and I think we're headed the right direction the first year with this Life Are You Ready program.
All right, thank you, Sergeant Johnson. And finally, let me go to Chief Lowell regarding reducing juvenile crime and specifically also underage drinking. Your thoughts?
I think there's about five parts of the approach. I think it begins with, for us, and the PD, it's beginning at the 5th and 6th grade level with DARE. I think we teach that to almost 800 students. We also provide pre-summer camps for children, and they're full. We also do some logistical support for a high school summer camp. We also have a daytime curfew ordinance which says that if you, by statute, should be in school, then that's where you should be. We also, I think that the Are You Ready for Life is the next transition. I think it is the most positive thing I've seen come along. We did 700 children in that program. And if you haven't been, I would encourage you to go because it is stunning what goes on. I think as far as alcohol, there's 2 grants we worked through, the performance grant through the Wyoming Sheriff's and Chiefs of Police, and the UDO grant. I think number 1 is delay the onset of the first drink, because all studies show if you delay the onset of the first drink, the chances of addiction are greatly lowered. Second thing is stop having events where the point of emphasis is selling alcohol, otherwise you couldn't have.
So let's begin right here. Based, I would say, on talk throughout the town and a lot of talk online, it seems to be an 800-pound gorilla in the room
Yes,
that
it's
everybody's
here.
talking about, but it's not being talked about. So let me pose this to Sheriff Haskell. And if so, why, did you not put the $6,000 worth of prepared Christmas cards out for bid? Sheriff, you would care to address that?
Sure, I did put them out for bid, and I went to several sources to try to get the cheapest price. And I wanted to have them a little more personalized than what you could get a commercial one. And it happened to be with my daughter-in-law, and that was the cheapest price, and it was okayed by the commission at the time, and I went forward with it.
Very good. And I guess I would direct this next to Sergeant Johnson. Any thoughts regarding that topic?
No, I don't have any thoughts other than I'd probably go down to Walgreens and buy some cheap cards and sign my name to them.
All right, very good. And finally to Chief Lowell, anything in follow, and does that satisfactorily answer that question for you, sir?
Yeah, I can't buy cards, so that's prohibited by municipal ordinance. So if I buy cards, I buy them out of my own pocket.
Okay, very good. Ladies, any follow-on regarding that question?
Others, before the debate tonight and during now, would like you to address the other allegations of misuse of funds and allegations floating around about past theft or even more recent allegations.
Now, let me jump in if I may. Deb, do you know exactly who this is directed to?
No, these both came.
Okay. So to be fair, I tell you to be fair, how about if we direct this to Sergeant Johnson first? Any allegations, I guess, from either department regarding misuse of funds? Sergeant Johnson.
All I can speak for is my department, emergency management. As far as I know, there hasn't been any misallocation of funds or theft of funds. So I don't have anything else I can really say about that. That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Sergeant. Let me go now to Chief Lowell regarding any allegations of misuse in funds, either in your department with the RSPD or the Sheriff's Office.
No, there are three areas that are key to success in any law enforcement organization. One is integrity-based leadership. What that means is you do things at the right time in the right way for the right reasons. The second is your accountability. So you as the executive are responsible for everything that does or does not happen in your agency, whether you're there or not. Can you assign some of the responsibility for an individual task? Certainly, but you're still responsible for it. The third is transparency. Everything you do must stand the light, so your budget's got to be tight, clear-fisted. You got to be tough on them. You have to. If you say you're going to buy it, then you in fact have to buy it. You have to prove it. So it's simple to say, but you have to constantly struggle to maintain those three areas. And other than that, I have no response.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Let me get back to Deb Sutton. Does that adequately answer that question for you, ma'am?
Yes, and then Sheriff Haskell, a response on that.
You forgot me.
I would never forget
Never.
you, Sheriff.
Every penny that is spent with the Sheriff's Office has to be okayed by the County Commission. The County Commission has okayed every expenditure that the Sheriff's Office has made.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Moving right along, this next question is directed initially to Chief Lowell. With regards to accountability and transparency, how do you respond to the allegations made by law enforcement officers regarding one of your supervisors having an affair with a member of the attorney's office, causing at least 3 cases to be pled, including at least 1 homicide, with no reprimand to the staff supervisor? Chief Lowell.
Wyoming statute prohibits me from talking about any kind of personnel issue in the public forum. So what I will tell you is the same thing we do on any internal investigation. One, we accept any complaint, written, anonymous, or otherwise. One, that complaint is investigated, and there are 3 findings. One, it did happen. Two, it did not happen, or we can't prove it. That's it. Any decision from then on is based solely on my discretion, and I don't discuss personnel issues at all.
Thank you, Chief. Same question, any thoughts? Sheriff Haskell.
As the chief said, state statute does not allow an administrator to discuss any personnel matters.
Very good. Finally, Sergeant Johnson.
Same.
Thank you, sir. Deb Sutton, please keep me on task and tell us where we are moving next.
We are going to move to the audience, Johnny, and this first question will be answered by Sheriff Haskell.
All right, and Teresa Thibault, I hope I got that correct. Ma'am, would you like to read this, or would you like me to read this?
I'd like to read it.
Let me come to you, ma'am. Thank you for posing this question.
I also have a question as to why the people who wrote those last three's names were not mentioned. I would appreciate that. My question is, how would you handle misconduct by one of your employees?
And I believe that is first to Sheriff Haskell.
Sheriff Haskell.
Misconduct is, first we have the allegation, then we have the investigation, the internal investigation done by the office, or if we feel necessary, we go to an outside agency to do that investigation so that there is absolutely no bias whatsoever as far as the department is concerned. If there are factors that say there has been wrongdoings and it's proven, then we take corrective action to take care of that, whether it be time off, days off, pay, without pay, even up to termination.
All right, very good. Sergeant Johnson?
The procedures are pretty cut and dry, like the sheriff said. I don't know how the Rock Springs PD handles these cases. I'm sure it's pretty close to the same. But you get the allegation, you investigate it. If you need to bring in an outside agency to do that investigation, you come to a conclusion, and then you take the appropriate action, whether, like the sheriff said, it stays off up to termination.
Very good, sir. And finally, Chief Lowell.
Police department has policy on misconduct, but misconduct has to be defined. And we're unique that we are a civil service agency, so by policy, any and all complaints are investigated. No matter how particularly frivolous they are, or you think they're frivolous, they're still investigated. Once they're investigated, it goes to the chain of command. It's endorsed by every division commander. And once that's done, it's reviewed by the Civil Service Commission. Once that's done, it's reviewed by me. Okay, and then I come back for any questions I have, and then we take whatever appropriate action, if any, is done.
All right, very good, sir. Teresa, let me try and answer this as best I can, and ladies, feel free to jump in. Some of these questions I know from tonight and previous debates have been submitted through various media outlets, whether it's online, whether it's sweetwaternow.com, whether it's the Rocket Miner. I don't know that there's a specific policy requesting somebody's name be part of that. Deb?
Yes, and also we had a couple here that did have names on them, but they were similar to what we were going to ask anyway. So it really is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, as Johnny said.
Okay. Ma'am, does that hopefully answer your question?
Not really. I mean, all of us that are here have to give our names and show our faces to them.
Oh, I understand.
And I do believe that the people that ask those questions should also have to.
You're absolutely right. You don't have to if you'd like to make an anonymous question. And Johnny asks, if you don't want to ask it yourself on the air, we can certainly do that for you. So don't let that stop you from putting some questions forth. This is your forum. This is your debate. We want your participation.
All right, thank you, Deb, and keeping me on task once again. Next series of questions, I believe, will be directed first to Sergeant Johnson. And which direction are we going, Deb?
Let's try that one.
All right. Where is it Dominic? Sir, would you like me to read this question, or would you care for me to?
I can read it, because I'll kind of rephrase it.
All right. Let me come your way, sir.
Well, I was just curious, what is everybody's stance on allowing teachers and school faculty members to possibly have training to carry concealed firearms in school?
And Sergeant Johnson, that's to you first. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I actually answered that question earlier today on my Facebook page, and it's a frequently asked question apparently, but I'm a proponent of it. Obviously, there's got to be some very specific guidelines. You know, it's got to be in coordination with the state. We need to get some good tactical training from the, you know, we have a great firearms instruction team here that can teach those tactical trainings to the teachers. And of course, you got to have teachers that want to volunteer for it. Other than that, I'm a big proponent of it. I think if we had, you know, armed teachers, it'll curtail some of this. It's been proven, you know, worldwide. You don't see schools in Israel being attacked. You know, they definitely are armed over there, and they are surrounded on 3 sides by, you know, somebody that wants to see them gone. It works. And I think if we have the armed teachers and it's posted at the schools that the teachers carry arms, then that will curtail some of these school shootings, I believe.
All right, thank you, Sergeant Johnson. Same question, Chief Lowell.
I think that a bunch of things have to happen. One, it was tried in 2 legislations ago, it failed miserably. Up and down, right and left, even the governor didn't endorse it. Too. So if the legislation comes forward that is factually based, reflective, intellectual, students agree, or it's not students, but some of the staff agrees, however, giving blanket authority to all in the school to carry weapons, absolutely not. I don't think blanket authority is an appropriate thing. Do I like administrators? If the legislation, or if the policy is factually based and they agree, let me tell you, in my 30-plus years, the #1 issue is always the use of force, deadly force. The constant training we do, the constant questioning of officers, the constant understanding of the liabilities we face. The other thing is, when you have an incident, all of us are bound to help each other at whatever school it is. We know each other. We don't know those staffs, and I can assure you, if we go into a school and you are waving a gun, there is going to be carnage beyond belief for law enforcement. So I'm not a fan of blanket authority. I don't think that works. I think it has to be narrowly defined.
All right, thank you, Chief. And finally, let me direct this to Sheriff Haskell regarding your stance on teachers and school staff carrying concealed weapons at school.
I don't think that decision belongs in law enforcement's hands. Either the sheriff's office, police department, DCI, or anybody else. That is a decision that has to be made by the school board and by the school administration. If they make that decision for that to happen, I would strongly support having a class that we offer to the general public and also an advanced class to teach them how to handle the firearm. One of the biggest problems that I can see is you get, and you see it every day, people will wave the gun around. Oh, I got a gun, I have a gun, I have a gun. Well, that's the biggest mistake that you can make, because they're the first target. Because everybody knows they have a gun, we take him out, and then we're all able to do what we want to in the school. So there has to be policies, there has to be training, there has to be guidelines that make that happen if it does happen. But I do support that if that happens.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. And in rebuttal, Sergeant Johnson, anything?
No, I have nothing else.
Anything in rebuttal, Chief Lowell?
No, I don't think it's a local decision. I think it's a states' rights issue. I think it's going to have to come from the governor's office. I think it's going to have to be backed by the legislature. I think that if it's approved, then it should be mandated statewide. There should be no exceptions to the rule.
All right, thank you. And anything in closing, Sheriff Haskell?
No, sir.
All right, where is Wendy at? Wendy Miller? Ma'am, would you care to read this, or would you like me to? Okay. Great follow-on, Wendy, thank you. Gentlemen, and I believe this is going first to
Chief Lowell.
Chief Lowell, thank you. A lot of talk, and a lot of emphasis about the Second Amendment. What are your thoughts on the Fourth Amendment?
As in regards to what? What do you want to know? What about the Fourth Amendment?
Wendy, anything specifically regarding the Fourth Amendment that is an issue of concern for you?
Just possibly,
However, where's the line drawn where search warrants are issued? Is it a public concern? Is it a safety concern? Is it imminent danger?
Well, okay, nobody issues more warrants in the county than the city of Rock Springs or applies for more search and seizure warrants. We teach the class on it. I think that the issue you have to remember is that we are not a member of the Blue Army. I'm a hometown municipal police department. I enforce the law because the people submit to my authority. I don't do search warrants out of hand. Our warrants are on violent offenders and narcotics uses, but we are successful because we don't abuse the process. And we write our own, the judge approves them, and believe me, there's no judge in this town will give you blanket approval for anything on a search warrant. They are fine lines scrutinized, and you are held to a standard that is unbelievable.
All right, thank you, Chief. Gentlemen, once again, if I could encourage you to try to talk as directly at the microphone as possible. It seems that some of our guests in the back are still having a tough time hearing. Let me pose that same question to Sheriff Haskell regarding your thoughts on the Fourth Amendment and particularly warrants.
As the chief has already said, search warrants are not just blanketly given out. A judge scrutinizes them, and before the judge scrutinizes them, we take them to the county attorneys and have them look them over to see if they're going to fly. Unfortunately, we do have to issue search warrants, and unfortunately, we do have to come into people's homes and into their private areas and be able to get evidence that we have to further the investigation. But just to violate a search warrant, absolutely we do not, and do not encourage it.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Finally, Sergeant Johnson, your thoughts on the Fourth Amendment and obtaining a warrant.
Well, I definitely agree with the chief and the sheriff that the last thing we want to do is violate people's Fourth Amendment rights. We feel, and I agree, that when we are in our house, that we should be able to feel safe there. There is stringent guidelines to obtaining a search warrant. You got to have your search warrant written up. It's got to be approved by a judge. He's not just going to sign it. And you know, that warrant is executed. But we definitely, everybody makes sure that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that we do it right. If we start abusing that and making lots of mistakes and getting sloppy, we're definitely going to lose the faith and trust of the citizens in the county, and that's one thing we don't want to do.
All right, thank you, Sergeant Johnson. Anything in rebuttal, Chief Lowell?
No, thank you.
Sheriff?
Well, we'll not only lose the faith of the community, but we'll lose the case.